right now, as you're listening to this, your brain is actually shrinking.
Yeah, it's a terrifying thought.
It is. And it's this biological reality that, most of us just completely ignore. We spend, literal billions of dollars on skincare and joint health or hair preservation, right? We completely fixate on the visible markers of aging.
Oh, absolutely.
But the actual operating system of our consciousness, the physical mass of our brain, it slowly loses volume year after year once we hit our mid-20s.
Hmm.
And we just dismiss it like a forgotten name or a misplaced set of keys. And we say, well, it's just normal wear and tear.
Right, just getting older.
Exactly. But what if that structural degradation isn't, entirely inevitable? What if the physical architecture of your brain, like its literal volume and resilience, is heavily dictated by a very specific type of fat that you decide whether or not to put on your plate?
And that's the thing. It forces us to entirely reevaluate what a diet actually is. I mean, we usually think of food as fuel, right?
Yeah.
Calories in to produce energy out.
Yeah.
But the brain doesn't just burn what you eat. It physically builds itself out of it. We're really moving away from treating cognitive longevity as this like inevitable genetic lottery.
Mm-hmm.
We are finally recognizing that the brain is a highly dynamic physical structure.
Right.
If you don't provide the exact raw materials required for the scaffolding, well, the building is going to sag.
And that is exactly what this deep dive is about today. We are tailoring this exploration entirely for you, the listener. The insights today are, they're pulled directly from a really detailed clinical breakdown on the Ultimate Human channel featuring Gary Brecka.
It's a fantastic source.
It really is. But, our mission isn't just to tell you, like, hey, take a fish oil pill. We're going to decode the actual biological mechanisms at play here.
Right, because just hearing fish oil is good for you is such a cliche at this point.
Completely. So we're breaking down the dense cellular science into an actionable blueprint. That way, you can actively preserve your cognitive function, lower those inflammatory fires in your mind, and actually build a structurally resilient brain.
Because understanding the mechanism, it actually changes behavior.
It really does.
When you truly grasp how a specific lipid, embeds itself into the wall of a brain cell to literally allow a memory to form, prioritizing that nutrient stops feeling like a chore. It becomes a fundamental part of your daily cognitive defense strategy.
So before we can talk about defense, we have to look at the raw materials. The source material centers on omega-3 fatty acids, but immediately we run into this dense alphabet soup, right?
Oh, yeah. ALA, EPA, DHA.
Exactly. They're classified as polyunsaturated fats, and those are the primary three. So let's unpack this. What does polyunsaturated actually mean at a chemical level, and why does that specific structure matter so much?
Well, the chemistry is like the entire key to how they function. To visualize this, picture a fatty acid as a long chain of carbon atoms.
Okay, got a chain of carbons in my head.
Right. So a saturated fat, like, say, butter, has every single carbon atom fully saturated with hydrogen atoms. This makes the chain perfectly straight, rigid, and able to pack really tightly together.
Which is why butter is a solid block at room temperature.
Precisely. A polyunsaturated fat, however, is missing several hydrogen atoms along the chain. Poly means multiple, and unsaturated means it's missing hydrogens.
Okay, so it's missing pieces.
Right, and wherever a hydrogen is missing, the carbon atoms form a double bond to compensate. And here's the really crucial part. That double bond creates a sharp physical kink or a bend in the carbon chain.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, because these chains are bent and crooked, they cannot pack tightly together. They remain totally fluid and flexible, even at really cold temperatures.
So the chemical structure directly dictates the physical behavior of the fat. Like it's fundamentally fluid instead of rigid.
Exactly, and that fluidity brings us back to the alphabet soup. So ALA is alpha-linolenic acid, which is a plant-based precursor.
Right.
EPA is icosapentaenoic acid, and DHA is docosahexaenoic acid.
What?
While all three are important, the source isolates DHA with a statistic that is, well, it's almost hard to believe.
Hit me with it.
DHA makes up approximately 97% of the omega-3 fatty acids in the human brain.
Wow. Okay, let's unpack this because that number implies exclusivity. If a single molecule accounts for 97% of a specific class of material in an organ as complex as the human brain, it isn't just passing through.
No, not at all.
It's foundational. Like, if the human brain is a towering skyscraper, DHA isn't just the office furniture inside, right? It represents 97% of the actual concrete poured into the foundation and the steel I-beams holding up the walls.
That's a perfect analogy. It is the primary architectural component of the cellular membrane. Every single neuron in your brain is encased in a lipid bilayer. It's a flexible shell made of fats.
Okay.
And this membrane, it isn't just a static wall. It's a highly active, totally dynamic border crossing. It contains all these embedded proteins, receptors, ion channels, and they must constantly physically shift and change shape to allow signals to pass in and out.
Oh,
Yeah, and because DHA has so many of those double bond kinks we talked about, it keeps that cellular membrane highly fluid. It creates literal physical space within the cell wall, which allows those embedded proteins the room they need to move and operate.
so if your diet lacks DHA and your body is forced to build brain cells out of, I don't know, stiffer saturated fats, that cell membrane just becomes rigid.
Exactly. The membrane becomes rigid.
I imagine that if the membrane is rigid, those embedded proteins are essentially trapped in cement. Like they can't flex to receive signals at all. But wait, if DHA is doing 97% of the heavy lifting for the physical structure, why do we even care about the other two? Like, what are ALA and EPA doing? Are they just the leftover 3%?
Well, what's fascinating here is that they serve an entirely different systemic function. You have to view the brain not as an isolated organ, floating in a jar, but as an organ sitting within a highly volatile systemic environment, which is your body.
Right.
While DHA builds the local scaffolding of the brain, EPA specifically acts as a powerful systemic regulator of inflammation.
Okay, so they have different jobs.
Right. MPA produces these specialized molecules that constantly patrol your bloodstream, looking for rogue inflammatory signals
Right.
and basically neutralizing them before they can breach the blood-brain barrier and damage that fragile DHA scaffolding.
So if DHA is the structural engineer building the skyscraper, EPA is the neighborhood fire suppression system, making sure the environment around the building doesn't burn it down.
That is an incredibly accurate way to model it.
Yeah.
The polyunsaturated structure of these fats lays the groundwork for both physical flexibility and chemical regulation. And, this dual-action construction project, it actually begins long before we're adults worrying about cognitive decline.
Right.
It begins in the womb.
Which brings us to the timeline of how this fat operates across an entire human lifespan, really. The source details how omega-3s operate in this cradle-to-grave capacity, like during fetal development, specifically in the third trimester when the brain undergoes this massive expansion.
The growth is just exponential.
Exactly. The demand for maternal DHA just skyrockets. It's actively driving the formation of those neuronal membranes, but also it's driving a process called neurogenesis.
Right, and neurogenesis is the literal creation of brand new neurons.
Which is wild to think about.
It really is, because for decades, the scientific consensus was just that we were born with a set number of brain cells, and we, slowly lost them over time.
Yeah, that's what I was always taught in school.
Right. But we now know that specific regions of the brain, like the subgranular zone of the dentate gyrus within the hippocampus.
It's at 3 times fast.
Right. But those areas retain the ability to generate new neurons throughout your entire life. During early childhood development, though, this process is in absolute overdrive. The mother's dietary intake of DHA provides the raw material necessary to construct these new cells.
So the physical building blocks provided by the mother's diet literally dictate the structural potential of the child's brain. The source notes that early maternal and childhood intake is directly associated with measurably improved learning abilities and, better behavioral regulation.
Yes, the data is very clear on that.
Well, once that initial explosive growth phase ends and we reach adulthood, what is the DHA actually doing day to day? Are we just, maintaining the concrete?
Well, maintenance is a massive part of it, for sure, because cell membranes are constantly turning over and they need repair. But in adulthood, the focus shifts heavily towards synaptic function and neurotransmitter regulation.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because I want to talk about neurotransmitters.
Right, the chemical messengers.
Yeah.
Serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, they're the chemical language of the brain. They dictate your mood, your focus, your ability to retrieve a memory.
I always used to visualize this process as neurotransmitters acting like little traffic cops directing signals around the brain. But based on what you just said about the cell membrane being fluid, that doesn't quite fit the biology, does it?
No, it doesn't. A much better way to visualize it is to think of the neurotransmitters as physical keys and the receptors on the outside of your brain cells as the locks.
Okay, locks and keys.
But here's the catch. Those locks are not bolted to a solid wooden door. They are floating in that lipid bilayer, a literal sea of fat.
Oh, wow.
When a neurotransmitter key floats across the synapse and tries to enter the lock must be able to physically shift and alter its conformation to actually accept the key.
So it has to wiggle around to let the key in.
Exactly. If the lipid sea is filled with fluid DHA, the lock moves easily. the key turns and the signal fires perfectly. But if the sea is filled with rigid, saturated, or trans fats from a really poor diet, the lock is frozen.
And the key just bounces off.
The key literally bounces off.
That is a staggering realization. Like, the physical fluidity of the fat in your diet directly dictates the efficiency of your intangible chemical thoughts.
Yes, absolutely.
You could have perfectly normal levels of serotonin floating around in your brain, but if your cell membranes are stiff, the serotonin can't dock properly. So you might still experience the exact symptoms of a chemical deficit, even if the chemicals are there.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the clinical data completely supports this mechanical reality. The source highlights this really comprehensive study from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition.
Okay, what did they find?
They assessed a large cohort of healthy adults and found a direct, measurable correlation. Individuals with higher circulating levels of DHA in their bloodstream consistently performed better on a whole battery of complex cognitive tests.
Because their locks are moving freely.
Yes, and furthermore, tracking these individuals over time revealed a significantly lower long-term risk of developing dementia.
Because they aren't just, boosting a temporary chemical signal with a stimulant or something. They have actually optimized the physical hardware of the receptor sites. The keys are turning smoothly.
Exactly. They have maintained the physical integrity of the locks.
Mm-hmm.
And when those locks govern not just memory, but our mood, we cross over from cognitive performance into the realm of severe psychological well-being.
And this is where the source deep dives into territory that completely reframes how we view mental health. Because we understand the physical docking of neurotransmitters now, but the source details how omega-3s are actively deployed to cool the brain's inflammatory fire.
Right.
And we're so accustomed to thinking about inflammation as like a sprained ankle swelling up or a distressed gut. The idea of an inflamed brain feels much more abstract to me. But how does a brain actually catch on fire, biologically speaking?
Well, this raises an important question because it really is a critical paradigm shift in psychiatric neuroscience. The brain actually has its own dedicated immune system, and it's primarily managed by these cells called microglia.
Microglia, okay.
Yeah. And when the body experiences chronic stress or, say, a poor diet full of processed foods or environmental toxins, these microglia become hyperactivated. They start acting like cellular alarms, releasing highly inflammatory proteins called cytokines right into the surrounding brain tissue.
So they're just dumping alarm chemicals everywhere. What do those cytokines do to the neurotransmitter locks and keys we just talked about?
They absolutely devastate the system. High levels of inflammatory cytokines physically damage the cellular membrane, which increases oxidative stress. But even worse, and this is crazy, they can literally hijack the biological assembly line that creates your neurotransmitters.
Wait, really? How?
For instance, the raw material your body uses to make serotonin is an amino acid called tryptophan.
Like the stuff in turkey that makes you sleepy.
Right, exactly. But when your brain is bathed in these inflammatory cytokines, the metabolic pathway for tryptophan is totally diverted. Instead of turning tryptophan into serotonin, the inflamed brain takes it and turns it into a highly neurotoxic compound called quinolinic acid.
Oh my God. So the inflammation isn't just blocking the serotonin signal, it's actively destroying the factory that makes the feel-good chemicals and replacing it with a literal toxin.
Yes.
That completely explains why viewing depression as a simple chemical imbalance in a vacuum is just so incomplete. It is a massive inflammatory cascade. So where do the omega-3s step in to stop this?
This is exactly the role of EPA. Remember, EPA is the systemic fire extinguisher. When EPA enters an inflamed environment, it doesn't just passively block the inflammation.
Right.
It is actively converted by the body into specialized molecules called pro-resolving mediators, or SPMs.
SPMs.
Yeah, these include resolvins and protectins.
Yeah.
And as their names suggest, they actively resolve the inflammation. They signal those hyperactive microglia to shut down the cytokine alarms and initiate a cellular cleanup process.
So they chemically tell the immune system, hey, the emergency's over, stand down. The source is deeply methodical about the clinical applications of this mechanism, too. It cites a pivotal study in the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry examining patients with major depressive disorder. And they found that omega-3 supplementation significantly reduced depressive symptoms. But the critical biological variable, which is so cool, was that it worked most effectively in individuals who already presented with high systemic markers of inflammation.
Which perfectly validates the mechanism we just discussed. I mean, if a patient's depression is driven purely by a psychological trauma, without a massive biological inflammatory response, Omega-3s might not be the primary lever.
Right, that makes sense.
But if their depression is the downstream symptom of an inflammatory fire hijacking their tryptophan pathway, well then EPA is the exact biological tool required to extinguish it.
It is wild to think a dietary fat is being studied as an adjunct treatment for conditions as severe as that. And the same journal published further research extending this intervention to bipolar disorder, showing that omega-3s can stabilize mood and reduce symptom severity there, too.
Yeah, it's incredibly broad.
And the source pulls a meta-analysis from the Translational Psychiatry Journal, specifically isolating the EPA component, demonstrating its efficacy in reducing symptoms of clinical anxiety.
And we must push this even further because the transcript points to research from schizophrenia research, indicating that omega-3 interventions can even improve cognitive function and reduce the severity of symptoms in individuals suffering from schizophrenia.
Wow.
When you see a single nutritional intervention showing efficacy across major depressive disorder, bipolar, anxiety, AND schizophrenia, it forces the medical community to acknowledge a unified underlying pathology.
And that pathology is brain inflammation.
Precisely.
The Harvard Health blog actually echoes this, stating that broad populations consuming higher levels of omega-3s simply exhibit fewer mood swings and lower baselines of depression overall. It provides this incredible biological lever for you, the listener.
It really does.
While omega-3s are explicitly noted as an adjunct therapy, meaning, they're used alongside traditional medical treatments, not replacing them, they address the fundamental environment of the brain. You can't heal a patient if their brain tissue remains on fire.
And if you leave that fire burning for decades, the consequences extend far beyond daily mood regulation.
Right, it gets worse.
A brain that spends years bathed in inflammatory cytokines and the resulting oxidative stress will inevitably begin to experience accelerated cellular death.
Which transitions us from daily mental health to long-term neuroprotection, shielding the aging brain. The transcript is explicit that chronic inflammation and oxidative stress are the direct precursors to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. I want to drill down on this concept of oxidative stress, though.
Okay, let's do it.
We often hear it described vaguely as, rusting. But at a cellular level, inside the brain, what is actually happening during oxidative stress?
It's basically a process of molecular theft. Your cells naturally produce unstable molecules called free radicals, just as a byproduct of producing energy.
Okay, free radicals.
Yeah, and a free radical is essentially an atom that is missing an electron, which makes it highly volatile. To stabilize itself, it will ruthlessly attack the nearest healthy molecule and rip an electron away from it.
Oh, wow.
Now, if a free radical attacks the fragile polyunsaturated fats in your brain's cell membrane, the DHA we keep talking about, it creates a chain reaction called lipid peroxidation.
Lipid peroxidation, that sounds bad.
It's very bad. One damaged fat molecule damages the next, acting like a microscopic domino effect that literally tears holes in the cellular wall.
The membrane loses its integrity, the locks and keys stop working, and eventually the entire neuron just collapses and dies.
That's exactly. But omega-3 fatty acids, alongside the body's natural antioxidant systems, they act as structural shock absorbers. They help mitigate that damage and maintain the integrity of the barrier. And when you prevent that microscopic cellular death across millions of neurons over decades, you alter the macroscopic physical structure of the brain itself.
So what does this all mean? This brings us back to that terrifying concept from the introduction, brain shrinkage.
Yeah.
The source cites this incredibly compelling study from the University of Texas Health Science Center. They didn't just look at the elderly either. They looked at middle-aged adults, and they discovered that omega-3 supplementation was directly associated with improved brain structure and cognitive function, visibly lowering the long-term risk of Alzheimer's.
The inclusion of middle-aged adults there is so vital because neurodegeneration doesn't just start the day you forget where you parked your car in your 70s. It is a slow, insidious accumulation of oxidative damage that begins decades earlier. By intervening in middle age, you're providing the structural armor right when the natural repair mechanisms begin to slow down.
But the most staggering evidence comes from the Journal of Neurology study detailed in the source. They measured the circulating blood levels of omega-3s in older adults and found not just better memory scores, but measurably larger brain volumes, particularly in the hippocampus, which is the brain's primary memory center.
To understand the gravity of that, you have to understand how an MRI measures brain atrophy.
Okay, how does that work?
When neurons die, the physical tissue of the brain shrinks. As the tissue shrinks, The fluid-filled spaces inside the brain, which are called ventricles, they actually expand to fill the empty space inside the skull.
Oh, I see.
So when a radiologist looks at a scan of an advanced Alzheimer's patient, they see massive ventricles and severely shrunken, visibly withered hippocampal tissue.
So when the study says larger brain volume, it literally means the physical mass of the memory center was preserved. The participants who had higher omega-3 levels physically retained more of their brain matter. They defied the natural shrinking process.
They absolutely did.
And the source reinforces this with a secondary study from Frontiers in Aging and Neuroscience confirming the exact same link. Higher blood levels equal larger total brain volume and a massively reduced risk of cognitive decline.
It really is the ultimate anti-aging protocol. You're providing the continuous stream of raw material necessary to replace the damaged bricks in the wall before the wall collapses. But recognizing the necessity of the raw material naturally begs the question of sourcing.
Right, how do we actually get it?
How do we effectively get this specific lipid architecture into our bodies, and why is the modern diet so uniquely hostile to this exact process?
That is the logistical crux of our deep dive, the platter and the pill. We know we want the fluid cell membranes, the extinguished inflammation, and the preserved brain volume. The transcript divides our dietary options into two distinct categories: marine sources and plant sources. And there is a clear hierarchy. Marine sources are the undisputed champions. We are talking about fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines, trout. These contain highly bioavailable, preformed EPA and DHA. The transcript recommends a baseline target of 2 servings per week.
And that's because the marine ecosystem actually does the heavy lifting for us. The small fish eat the algae, which synthesizes the omega-3s, and then the larger fish concentrate in their tissue.
Okay, so they're doing the conversion work.
Exactly. When you eat a piece of wild-caught salmon, you are absorbing DHA that is ready to be immediately deployed into your brain's cellular membranes without any complex metabolic conversion on your part.
Okay, let's unpack this. If I'm eating chia and flax every single day, am I fully covered? What about the plant sources? The source lists flax seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, hemp seeds. These contain ALA, the precursor. If a listener is strictly vegan, can the body just build the DHA it needs from the plant material?
Well, this is explicitly highlighted in the source as one of the most pervasive myths in nutrition.
Really?
Yes. The assumption is that ALA is a one-to-one replacement for DHA, but biologically it's just a precursor. When you consume ALA from a walnut, your liver has to use specialized enzymes, specifically one called delta-6 desaturase, to chemically elongate the carbon chain and add more double bonds to turn it into EPA and then eventually DHA.
So it has to manufacture the final product from the raw plant material?
Exactly, and the human body is remarkably inefficient at this specific conversion. Clinical studies show that the conversion rate of ALA to DHA is often less than 5%, and in some populations it is virtually zero.
Wait, almost zero?
Almost zero. You could eat a massive bowl of flax seeds every single day, and while you're getting some wonderful fiber and baseline ALA benefits, you're starving your brain of the structural DHA it fundamentally requires.
That biological bottleneck is a harsh reality for plant-based diets. So if the conversion rate is functionally negligible, how does a vegan listener actually build their cellular scaffolding without breaking their dietary ethics?
The transcript provides the definitive workaround, and it's algal oil. We mentioned earlier that fish don't magically produce omega-3s out of nothing. They accumulate them by eating marine algae.
Right.
Algae is the original foundational biological factory for DHA and EPA on planet Earth. By utilizing an algal oil supplement, individuals can completely bypass that inefficient hepatic conversion of ALA and the need to consume marine life. You are going straight to the botanical source to acquire the exact preformed lipids the brain demands.
That is an elegant biological hack. But acquiring the DHA is only half the battle, right? Because the source issues a massive warning about a dietary trap that most of the Western world is completely blind to.
Oh, the omega-6 ratio.
Yes, it is the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. We've talked about how omega-3s suppress the fire. The transcript points out that omega-6 fatty acids, which are entirely distinct, have the exact opposite effect.
Right. Now, omega-6 fatty acids are also essential, meaning our bodies cannot produce them, and we do need them to survive. When you get a cut and your immune system needs to create a localized inflammatory response to fight an infection and trigger blood clotting, it utilizes omega-6s, specifically one called arachidonic acid.
So they aren't inherently evil, they're biologically necessary.
Exactly. The issue is the ratio. Historically, human beings evolved on a diet where the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 was roughly 1-to-1. a perfect equilibrium between the immune system's ability to initiate an inflammatory attack and the EPA's ability to resolve it.
A balanced seesaw. But the modern Western diet has entirely obliterated that equilibrium. The source points the finger directly at industrial processed foods, and specifically seed oils. We are talking about corn oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, canola oil.
And these industrial seed oils are overwhelmingly dominant in omega-6 fatty acids. Because they're cheap to produce and they have a really long shelf life, they are the backbone of the processed food industry. They are in nearly every packaged snack, commercial salad dressing, and restaurant fryer.
It's inescapable.
It really feels that way. Consequently, the average modern human is consuming an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio that is closer to 20 to 1.
20 to 1. The seesaw isn't just tipped, it is completely broken.
It is a state of perpetual, low-grade systemic inflammation. But it gets even worse at the enzymatic level. Remember the delta-6 desaturase enzyme we just discussed? The one that converts plant ALA into EPA.
Yeah, the bottleneck enzyme.
That exact same enzyme is required to process omega-6s. It is a shared biological factory. So if you flood your system with a massive 20 to 1 ratio of omega-6s from, say, soybean oil, those omega-6s competitively inhibit the enzyme. They take over the factory. Even if you are actively trying to consume healthy omega-3s, the sheer volume of omega-6s blocks them from being processed properly.
I really want to make sure you, the listener, grasp this mechanism. It isn't just that the omega-6s are starting a fire. They are actively barricading the fire station so the omega-3s can't get the trucks out.
That's exactly what's happening.
You can diligently eat your wild-caught salmon twice a week, but if you cook it in corn oil or you eat a side of fries cooked in soybean oil alongside it, the chemical cascade from the omega-6s will completely overwhelm the benefits.
The math just doesn't work. You cannot out-supplement an inflammatory diet. The primary intervention must be subtraction. You have to become a ruthless reader of food labels. Eliminating the stealth omega-6 seed oils hidden in your pantry is arguably more important than adding an omega-3 supplement.
Which demands a shift in daily logistics. The source provides actionable tactics for integrating these fats properly while avoiding the biochemical pitfalls. It recommends highly frictionless habits like, throwing a tablespoon of ground chia or flax into a morning smoothie. Or, my personal favorite, keeping a stash of raw walnuts on your desk to replace the reflex to grab a processed omega-6 laden snack in the afternoon.
Small environmental adjustments like that dictate long-term dietary success.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The transcript highlights a critical warning about how we handle these fats in the kitchen. It mentions using flaxseed oil or walnut oil for salad dressings, but it issues a strict directive. Never use them for high-heat cooking. I imagine this circles back entirely to the polyunsaturated structure we discussed in the beginning, right? If those double bonds make the fat so beautifully fluid, do they also make it fragile?
Extremely fragile. A double carbon bond is chemically reactive.
Yeah.
When you expose a polyunsaturated fat like flaxseed oil to high thermal energy like a hot frying pan, you rapidly accelerate the oxidation process. The heat literally breaks the delicate double bonds, causing the fat to react with oxygen in the air.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this structural collapse turns the oil completely rancid.
So the fluidity that makes it so valuable for your brain's cell membrane is the exact property that makes it unstable under heat. If you try to fry an egg in flaxseed oil thinking you're making a healthy choice, you are actually consuming heavily oxidized, damaged lipids.
You're ingesting exactly the kind of free radical-generating compounds that cause the lipid peroxidation we are trying to prevent in the brain. It is entirely counterproductive. You must keep those delicate oils refrigerated, protected from light, and use them strictly for cold applications.
Good to know. What about the fish itself?
When it comes to cooking marine sources, the source recommends gentler methods, like baking, broiling, or light grilling, just to preserve the integrity of the DHA inside the fish tissue.
The source also navigates the landscape of the grocery store aisle, specifically addressing fortified foods. We see labels touting omega-3 enriched eggs or milk, right?
No, constantly.
And the transcript is generally supporting of this, but it raises a very specific, sharp red flag regarding fortification in general. It explicitly warns the listener to differentiate between omega-3 enrichment and folic acid fortification. The expert in the source is quoted as being not a fan of folic acid. Why does the transcript draw such a hard line here?
Well, while the source doesn't detour into an exhaustive biochemical lecture on genetics, the aversion to folic acid is rooted in the methylation cycle. Folic acid is a synthetic, man-made version of folate, which is vitamin B9.
And folate is good.
Folate is crucial for brain health. But a significant percentage of the population has a genetic variation in an enzyme called MTHFR. Because of this variation, their bodies struggle to efficiently convert synthetic folic acid into the active form the brain can actually use.
So if they consume highly processed foods fortified with synthetic folic acid, it can just build up in the bloodstream unmetabolized.
Yes. And unmetabolized folic acid can potentially interfere with the absorption of natural folate and disrupt the very cellular processes it was meant to aid. The warning in the source is a call for vigilance.
Right.
It's telling you not to be blinded by the word fortified. An omega-3 enriched egg from a chicken fed a flax-heavy diet is a biological matrix you want. A highly processed loaf of bread pumped full of synthetic folic acid is a biological variable you want to treat with caution.
This theme of vigilance extends directly to supplementation, too. The transcript vigorously attacks the myth that all fish oil supplements are created equal. It points out that because these fish exist in modern polluted oceans, they act as biological sponges for heavy metals, particularly mercury.
The marine food web bioaccumulates toxins. A cheap, poorly manufactured fish oil supplement that hasn't undergone rigorous molecular distillation and third-party testing for heavy metals is essentially a concentrated dose of neurotoxins. You're taking a pill to protect your brain, and instead you're delivering mercury directly to it.
Furthermore, the source emphasizes checking the actual lipid profile on the back of the bottle. A label might proudly claim on the front 1,000 milligrams of fish oil, but the actual active components, the DHA and EPA, might only account for 200 milligrams. The rest is just cheap filler fat.
And beyond the concentration, you must ensure the supplement hasn't succumbed to the same thermal degradation we discussed with cooking oils.
Right, going rancid.
Yes, a high-quality supplement will have a low TTOX value, which is a measure of total oxidation. If you open a bottle of fish oil and it smells overwhelmingly rancid and fishy, the double bonds have likely oxidized. The structural magic is just gone.
It's a really complex landscape to navigate, which naturally leads us to a fundamental truth the source emphasizes. A supplement is precisely that, supplemental. It cannot replace the intricate biological matrix of a whole food diet. When you eat a piece of salmon, you aren't just getting isolated DHA, you are getting high-quality protein, astaxanthin, selenium, and B vitamins that all operate synergistically to ensure that DHA is absorbed and utilized efficiently.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you just cannot isolate a single molecular variable and expect it to override a fundamentally broken biological environment.
And this realization opens the door to the final, most expansive section of our deep dive, the holistic brain. Because even if a listener calculates their omega-3 intake flawlessly, completely eradicates omega-6 seed oils, and finds the purest algal oil on the market, they cannot supplement their way out of a degenerative lifestyle.
Yes, exactly.
The physical building blocks are useless if the machinery of the body isn't actively demanding them. The transcript outlines 5 distinct lifestyle pillars that must run in parallel with the nutritional architecture.
Nutrition provides the bricks, but lifestyle provides the blueprint, the workers, and the delivery system. Without these 5 pillars, the omega-3s are essentially just sitting uselessly on the construction site.
Let's dissect the mechanics of these pillars, starting with exercise. The source recommends 3 to 5 days a week, roughly 30 minutes a session. It claims physical activity increases blood flow, supports neurogenesis, and massively reduces cognitive decline. But the transcript features a staggering quote. A sedentary lifestyle is the leading cause of all-cause mortality, and exercise has the greatest impact on mental health across all clinical trials. Why is moving your muscles so biologically intertwined with the health of your brain?
It comes down to vascular shear stress and chemical signaling. When you elevate your heart rate, the increased force of the blood pumping against the inner lining of your blood vessels, the endothelium, triggers the release of nitric oxide.
Okay, nitric oxide.
This physically dilates the vessels, ensuring that the DHA and EPA you consumed can actually be transported deep into the microcapillaries of the brain tissue. But even more profoundly, vigorous exercise stimulates the release of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
I've heard BDNF described as miracle grow for the brain.
That is an incredibly apt description. BDNF is a protein that actively promotes the survival of existing neurons and acts as the primary chemical trigger for neurogenesis, the growth of new neurons in the hippocampus that we discussed earlier. You can have all the omega-3 building blocks in your bloodstream, but without the BDNF signal generated by exercise, the body simply won't initiate the construction process.
So exercise is the literal command signal telling the brain to build. Okay, pillar number 2 is mental activities. The source is very clear that passively scrolling on a phone or watching television does not count. It demands active engagement, reading complex material, solving puzzles, learning a new language. But the most counterintuitive, fascinating insight from the transcript is the instruction to do tasks you explicitly don't like to do.
Right.
It claims that doing difficult, frustrating tasks is uniquely beneficial for the brain. What is the biological mechanism behind frustration?
What's fascinating here is that it's rooted in the concept of cognitive reserve and a principle of neuroscience, often summarized as neurons that fire together wire together. When you perform a task you are highly skilled at or one you find easy and pleasant, your brain relies on well-established, highly efficient neural pathways. It requires very little metabolic energy. It's essentially coasting.
Coasting on autopilot.
Right. But when you force yourself to learn something deeply frustrating, say a complex musical instrument or difficult software, you force the brain out of its rut.
You're intentionally inducing a localized stress response within the neural circuitry.
Exactly. The brain is forced to recruit new neurons, synthesize new synapses, and utilize that DHA to build entirely new pathways to solve the novel problem. You are actively expanding your neural network.
Building the reserve.
Yes, this builds a cognitive reserve, a massive surplus of alternative pathways. As we age, and some neural pathways inevitably degrade due to the passage of time, an individual with a deep cognitive reserve doesn't immediately show signs of decline because their brain simply reroutes the signal through the surplus pathways they built through years of difficult mental labor.
That reframes the concept of frustration entirely. The feeling of a difficult mental task isn't a sign of failure. It is the physical sensation of neuroplasticity. It is the feeling of the brain building reserve capacity.
It's a great way to look at it.
Pillar number 3 focuses on mitigating the opposite kind of stress. It is titled Manage Stress. The transcript lists mindfulness, meditation, yoga, and deep breathing. But the specific instruction is to deploy these tools to reduce stress right when it comes on, at the exact moment you feel it peaking. Why is real-time interruption so critical?
Because of the toxicity of chronic cortisol. When you experience psychological stress, your adrenal glands release a cascade of hormones, primarily cortisol, to prepare you for a fight-or-flight response. In short bursts, this is highly adaptive. But modern life often leaves the stress response locked in the on position. Chronic unremitting cortisol is highly neurotoxic, particularly to the hippocampus, the memory center.
It seems like the hippocampus is the battleground for all of this.
It absolutely is. Prolonged exposure to high cortisol levels physically damages the dendrites, which are the branching receivers of the neurons in the hippocampus, causing the tissue to shrink. When the source advises utilizing deep breathing in real time, it is advocating for a mechanical override of the nervous system. Slow, diaphragmatic breathing physically stimulates the vagus nerve, which signals the parasympathetic nervous system to halt the production of cortisol.
Wow.
You are biologically cutting off the toxic chemical bath before it can damage the cellular structures you used your omega-3s to build.
Which brings us to the ultimate recovery phase. Pillar number 4, sleep. The baseline recommendation is 7 to 9 hours, but the transcript doesn't just offer platitudes about resting. It provides 5 incredibly specific, biologically targeted protocols for sleep hygiene.
Yes, these are crucial.
1. Darken the room completely. 2. Cool the room off. 3. Take a contrast shower before bed. 4. Do a breathing exercise in bed. And 5. Unplug your electronics and keep the phone exactly 6 feet away from your head. So, what does this all mean for our evening routine? Let's decode the mechanics here. Why the obsession with temperature and a contrast shower?
Sleep is not merely a state of unconsciousness. It is a highly active metabolic phase. For the brain to initiate deep, restorative sleep, your core body temperature must drop by roughly 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit. A cold room facilitates this. The contrast shower alternating between hot and cold water might sound counterintuitive, but it manipulates your vascular system.
How so?
Well, the hot water brings blood to the surface of the skin, dilating the vessels. When you step out of the shower into a cool room, that massive surface area of blood rapidly releases heat, causing your core temperature to plummet, which acts as a powerful biological trigger for sleep onset.
Oh, that's brilliant. It's manually crashing your core temperature to trick the brain into sleep. And what about the strict directive regarding the phone? Darkening the room makes sense for melatonin production, but the source explicitly mandates keeping the phone 6 feet away.
The 6-foot rule addresses both physiological and psychological interference. Physiologically, moving the device minimizes your proximity to the immediate electromagnetic field generated by the phone, Well, the science on low-level EMFs is complex. Creating physical distance removes the variable entirely.
That makes sense.
Psychologically, though, it removes the immediate reflexive temptation to reach for the dopamine hit of a notification. If you wake up at 3 a.m. and the phone is on the pillow, you will check it, exposing your retina to blue light and instantly shattering your melatonin production.
And what is the brain actually doing with those 7 to 9 uninterrupted hours in a cold, dark room?
It is running the glymphatic system. During deep sleep, the fluid-filled spaces between your brain cells physically expand by up to 60%. The brain pumps cerebrospinal fluid through these expanded spaces, literally power washing away the metabolic waste products that accumulated during the day, including amyloid beta proteins associated with Alzheimer's.
Power washing the brain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you truncate your sleep, you shut down the power washer. The waste accumulates, triggering the exact inflammatory cascade the EPA in your diet is desperately trying to fight.
It is all completely interwoven. You cannot separate the diet from the sleep or the sleep from the stress. And that integration culminates in the final pillar, number 5, socialize. The source highlights seeking out social interactions for emotional well-being. It sounds simple, but I imagine the neurology of navigating a social interaction is anything but simple.
Human beings are fundamentally social primates. Isolation is registered by the nervous system as a profound biological threat, triggering chronic stress and elevating those toxic cortisol levels we discussed. Conversely, engaging in active socialization is one of the most complex cognitive tasks a human can perform. You are simultaneously interpreting body language, decoding vocal tonality, accessing memories to formulate a relevant response, and predicting the emotional state of another human being.
It's utilizing multiple brain regions simultaneously.
It is the ultimate real-world application of cognitive reserve training. It demands massive neural bandwidth, forcing the continuous utilization and reinforcement of the intricate lipid pathways we've spent this entire deep dive constructing.
It has been an incredibly dense, rewarding journey today. We didn't just accept the superficial advice to eat more fish. We zoomed into the microscopic level to witness the structural magic of DHA, realizing it is the literal 97% foundation of our cellular architecture, providing the fluid lipid sea that allows our neurotransmitter locks and keys to communicate.
It's a profound mechanism.
We tracked its necessity from the explosive neurogenesis in fetal development all the way to its role as a structural shock absorber, defying the natural shrinkage of the hippocampus in middle age. We mapped the powerful anti-inflammatory pathways of EPA, understanding how it chemically signals the microglia to shut down the cytokine fires that drive severe conditions like depression and anxiety.
Absolutely.
We navigated the treacherous dietary landscape, prioritizing preformed marine DHA, while ruthlessly eliminating the industrial omega-6 seed oils that hijack our enzymatic factories. And finally, we realized that the perfect nutritional architecture requires the blueprint of holistic living, forcing blood into the tissue with exercise, clearing the toxic waste with deeply regulated sleep, and continuously building our cognitive reserve through deliberate frustration and deep social connection.
It is a blueprint that fundamentally relocates the power of cognitive longevity back into the hands of the individual.
And listener, that is why we tailored this deep dive specifically for you. It's about equipping you with the biological why behind the daily what. When you are staring at a menu or deciding whether to stay up for one more episode or go to sleep in a cold, dark room, you aren't just making a lifestyle choice. You are actively determining the structural integrity, the volume, and the chemical resilience of your own consciousness. You are literally deciding how you will experience your own mind decades from now.
And as we close, I want to challenge you with a final thought that bridges the gap between the molecules we discussed and the life you actually live.
Right.
We established today that omega-3s provide your brain with the raw, physical building blocks necessary to execute neurogenesis, to create brand new neural pathways.
Right.
But we also established that those pathways are only forged when the brain is forced out of its comfort zone, when it encounters the friction of a difficult, unfamiliar task. So assuming you have optimized your lipid profile, assuming you have eliminated the seed oils and the structural blocks are stacked and ready on the construction site of your mind, what incredibly frustrating, profoundly difficult new skill are you going to force yourself to learn today? Are you going to fill the car with premium fuel and leave it parked in the garage? Or are you actually going to drive it somewhere incredibly challenging?
That is the ultimate test of the hardware we just built. The scaffolding is ready. Now you have to do the heavy lifting to build the reserve. Keep pushing the boundaries of your own circuitry. Until next time, keep diving deep.